Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have orders from High Command to help you become a better Helldiver. General Bash could be proud of. So today I'll be covering all of the tips and tricks that I think will drastically increase the speed that you improve at Helldivers too, because I think this is way more of a knowledge and experience like check rather than a skill check. I also have a bunch of other guides to go along with this that go a lot more in depth, from things like just in-depth builds and just strategy guides, but this will focus on things I think a lot of people overlook, irrelevant if they're new or old to the game. And if you have anything that you think would help people, let me know in the comments, because I'm guaranteed to have left something out that I passively do without thinking anymore. So lighting this off, we'll start with the main reason that I think that people end up just being terrible or just suck at Helldivers 2 and never end up improving. The most important thing over anything else that you could possibly do is be a good teammate. Team play is something that I've promoted since the very beginning, and having proper etiquette and respecting other people's time that you're playing with is pretty much the flat-out most important thing that we could talk about. The vast majority of people run it down in quick play all the time, and to get the general idea of the current state of quick play, I played and tried to host at least about 100 games of it, and for the most part, I had a really solid experience. Most people really understood the assignment, and all it took was just a little bit of communication. Something like a tactical reset when nobody has samples so that you can move across the map faster is how we do it a lot when I'm streaming, and almost every random person that I ran into, the second I was like, tactical reset, and then I'm dead, they did the same thing pretty much instantly, as long as it was communicated. So just try to use the chat to talk to people more and try and read it more often at least. I know it gets spammed with a bunch of objectives sometimes, but like just try and pay attention to it, because communicating is the best way to meet people that you want to play with and makes the games progress way smoother. I also know a lot of people say that you should use mics basically like all the time, but after hearing a bunch of hot miking, and you know this is true, right? Every single time someone's hot miking, someone's doing dishes in the background. So I personally prefer the text chat most of the time when I'm just random queuing, and I do genuinely think that that simple communication is just the most important thing you can do. Like, just as a team, especially if it's with people that you've never played with before. There's also like a couple of unwritten rules that seem to be obvious, but there's a lot of new people, and for some reason, the level 150s that I ran into that immediately leave when they die need to hear this again too. So the main rule that I think you should stand by is to never take somebody else's first support weapon, mech or car, like whatever. If somebody calls it in, it's theirs and you should respect that. But when it comes to like second support weapons, a really good habit to get into is dropping it on cooldown. Using stratagems early and often is really important. It's something I talk about all the time on stream, and it's something you see me and all my friends do on stream all the time. We leave those extra support gear just scattered all over the map, so that way if somebody dies in a bad spot, they can just go back and pick up whatever bonus gear is sitting around, and then they can use that to battle back to their gear that they died at. And sometimes just having the bonus backpack weapon sitting around is really fun, because somebody will just grab it and team load you. And team loading is something I have a whole separate video planned for, but it's something you shouldn't sleep on, because I've had some of the coolest and most memorable moments in the game when I was team loaded blasting with my friends.
Let her rip!
Just keep going, I'm gonna resupply you.
Hell yeah.
Oh,
Load in democracy!
Where?
Play, it's time. He's this to your left. To your hard left. You.
I almost got pushed into the dropship.
That's a little close. I'm out!
I am inside the dropship, guys.
Keep her going.
This is so good! What the fuck? Nobody's gonna believe me!
I
Take him down! Oh!
So there is something to be said about calling these things in and letting people use them. Just try and communicate. I know how little people talk in random games, but at least you can try. And a lot of my friends that just started the game when the Illuminate came out, because like a ton of people did come and play, they were just curious about stuff. So I would just drop in whatever weapon or mech or whatever they just wanted to try. So there's a time and a place for everything, and just going as far as typing, feel free to grab my second sub weapon, is good enough. But just assume that if you don't have permission to yoink someone's gear, then just don't take it. I also think that there's some dead air around kicking people, but if someone's just being toxic and stealing other people's stuff, griefing, spam team killing, whatever it might be, just kick them. It's not that big of a deal. Sending someone to the Shadow Realm because they're being a piece of shit is never a problem, but if you do join a game and get instantly kicked, almost all the time that happens, it's just an accidental SOS, or like somebody's friend disconnected, so they're just trying to get them back in the game, and you really shouldn't take that too personal. There also might be like some rare situation where you get kicked for a off-meta loadout by some like weirdos. But if that was the case, you were just going to have a miserable time in that lobby with like wannabe sweats that are just terrible at the game, and it wasn't worth it playing in that game in the first place. But I also understand the perspective if like a random person brings like all mines and an airburst rocket launcher. There's a pretty high chance they're chaos divers. So it's at your discretion whether you want to remove them or not. I personally kind of enjoy the chaos. Like, you've seen us run like the most ridiculous loadouts pretty much all the time. And one thing to note is that an accidental team kill here and there really isn't that big of a deal, right? Everyone gets shelved sometimes.
Okay, blew up my arm. Don't worry about it.
So try to be understanding, but if you really are having a bad time, just host your own games. And as we move on into other stuff, sharing resupplies is also super important, and assume that everyone will tap it once in a 4-man because nobody likes when you double dip. And try calling out when you're resupplying. I know that it shows on the map, but it really does make a world of difference to just like know when it's coming down, even if you just ping it a few times. You should also call every resupply in on cooldown because you can always go back and pick them up later, or like maybe you're pushing a mega base and you drop it in there, right? Waiting in that situation is good, but for the most part, I think dropping them on cooldown is better because just being able to kite backwards into them, like that zone's already cleared where you dropped it, so you're going to be safe when you're going back to grab the resupplies most of the time, at least. And a big solo tip I've been giving people like way back since March last year was to always load in at your extract and drop your first resupply there. It drastically changes the flow of the game, and it pretty much just always comes in clutch. Also, if you're duo splitting across the map just to like clear faster, just split the resupplies in between squads, like rotate it back and forth. And if you see somebody bleeding out, go in for that heroic rescue and give them the stim dap so they can get back in the fight.
Brother.
Stim me, brother!
I've got you.
I'm bleeding out!
In your back.
Now, when it comes to calling people in, don't throw people into the middle of an orbital napalm domain expansion unless they're a good friend. Right? Like, there's a good chance that if somebody also died in a spot they're at, it's pretty much overrun or it's not a good spot. So just try and put them close to you or close-ish to their stuff. And if they were across the map, like you were in that 2-2, then let their buddy call them in. Don't just slam it off and put them somewhere that they shouldn't be. You also should just ping ammo and stims that are just randomly on the map as you run by them, and also make sure that you ping all the large lads at every stage of the game. A lot of times people will miss them or be too overwhelmed to understand like that there is a massive threat on the field, so it's really important to point them out, especially when somebody is getting called back in. It makes it super, super easy to crash a hell pod, like back down onto whatever you need crushed. And if you are in that clutch moment where you're the last one alive, pay attention to your cooldown so that way you know what resources you have available. In this case, I waited on the respawn and kited it out because we were just running sterilizers and gas dogs for whatever reason. So I didn't want to throw as the last person up trying to 1v1 a Bile Titan when I was just tapped on every other resource, when I could just wait for that and then, then the situation is just cleared for free. Now, the last etiquette tip I have for you is that if you're playing with random people, try to ask if everybody is ready before you extract and call it in. When you do extract now, it automatically forces all the active patrols to move towards it, and then all of the new patrols will also come towards it. So if you're not super confident, you could just blow the entire lobby out solo, then waiting is really good manners. Now, the only reason to ever really extract is like bonus EXP and some samples, and I know a ton of people really need samples, and when you extract with samples, everybody gets all of them and the exact same amount. One other thing to say is that all resources are also shared when you pick them up, so like medals, super credits, and requisition automatically get added to your account immediately without extracting. But just to reiterate this, you do have to extract with the samples to get them. So I really just want to double down and say, more than anything, respecting people's time is super important and pretty much the most important thing you can do the entire game. And if you want to respect your own time, I highly recommend joining any creators Discord that you resonate with. If they say things that you like, a lot of the time the community that goes with them thinks mostly the same, and it's a lot easier to build like long-term friendships with people that you get along with. A lot of people in my community have built friendships up that have gone through a lot of different games that go well past Helldivers, so mine's linked down below, but I've made some amazing friends on this game that all run fabulous communities. Thicfila did a massive push with me on the balance docks, and our communities like rose to the occasion and helped turn Helldivers into what it is today. And he's one of my best friends after spending like a ludicrous amount of time together. So I highly recommend joining his community as well. But I've also become really good friends with a couple other people. Eravin, Mr. Pips, and Ltbuzzlitebeer. Like, they all just bring something to the table that I really like. And and they all run awesome communities, and I've had nothing but positive and good interactions with them, and I feel very blessed to be able to call them all my friends as well. And I think joining all of their communities is in your best interest if you want to make the most out of your time. So I linked all their channels down below for you guys already, but moving on to some tips I have for becoming a better Helldiver, we'll start with movement. I see a lot of people just back themselves into corners, or they're just always running away. And you just always want to have like an idea of where's safe, where you can go, and like where you're going, so that you can access more cover or equipment, so that way you can take down whatever is chasing you or push into whatever's in front of you. A lot of the time, standing and fighting is way better than running away. To help with that, there's a couple of other tips to do that. So there's like wiggle and spin technology. The spin move effectively makes enemies just shoot all around you in a circle because of how their AI works. And this is an old tip from a long time ago, but it still works on every unit in the game. Most of their shots will just spray around you as you just do a little loop in a circle. This just lets you like reload or think for a second. And when you use this on things like hunters, once you get good at it, it forces them to jump like right beside you, and then they'll miss their attack, and you can either punch them or just blast them. So a good movement is also part of like good positioning, and finding a good spot to hold out whenever there's a big call in so you can blast everything from safety is a huge part of making games a lot easier. Like one well-placed AT emplacement is pretty much the most fun you can have on the game, but it can easily handle an entire bug breach, bot drop, or illuminate call in. But a poorly placed one won't really do anything because you won't be able to access it. With that being said, if you don't go for weak points, most weapons just fall flat anyways, and they just won't get their full value. Even something as small like and as basic as a Liberator can make a massive difference when you know how to make it work. And a well-rounded build is the best way to make the most out of your favorite weapon. So if you have something you love using, bring things that make up for its weaknesses so you can really enjoy it. And if you need builds that can handle everything in every faction, like that they can throw at you, I have an in-depth build guide as the first link in the description for you. And I think it's important to be able to play everything because that makes you a better player, and it's just fun to be able to use whatever you feel like. But understanding your weapons is also really important. Advanced weapon stats aren't shown in the game, so I know most people never even really get to see them, but they can help you make the most out of whatever you're using. And I understand that you can use anything to win, but we don't want another situation where things are just bad for the sake of being bad. Things like the Slugger should get buffed, and something like the Plasma Accelerator Sniper Rifle that has like 68% damage fall off at 100 meters doesn't exactly scream sniper rifle, so that's why it's important to understand these things. This Google Doc is also linked down below, and I always make sure to keep a list of updated resources from all the amazing people that make them in the Useful Stuff channel in my Discord. I also have some quick tips for blasting every faction, but the biggest bug tip I could possibly give you for like what I think that I see that most people complain about as their main enemy is the Hunter, and parrying it out of the air does take some practice, but getting the timing down can also depend on ping, but for the most part, meleeing it and pretty much just stops the damage altogether as long as you time it to like stagger it out of that like leap animation. You can also do the same thing to a Brood Commander charge, keeping you nice and cozy. I noticed that the melee does desync through the Brood Commander charge on like depending on the patch, right? But the other option is to bring a high stagger weapon. You almost always see me taking the Bushwhacker because it completely locks down the bugs that could possibly be a problem, right? But I also love the Cookout for this, but just being able to stop the Zerg from just leaping in on you feels really good, and it makes the game just feel way better to play. Chargers are also drifting like crazy right now, so even though they said they fixed them, if you don't do a hard cut angle to like go past them, they'll just keep drifting after you as pretty much just as long as you let them. When we move on to bot tips, this is something you want to practice every time you get shot at by pretty much anything in the game where something's like charging at you, where you're going to take damage no matter what, and that's to dive away the second that damage is going to hit you, or in the bot's case, whenever you see the flash of a gun. The damage hitting your legs or arms instead of your chest and head helps you live way longer, and it prevents a back shot, so it's a win-win. We also had a massive update to the Barrager tank with the Illuminate update, where the front and rear of its missile rack went from AP5 heavy penetration all the way down to AP Light 0, which means that you can shoot it with anything you want and kill it. It's also important to know that enemies you're fighting in each mission are not random. So both of my advanced bot and bug guides will be getting updated over the course of the next week to reflect some of these changes, but for now the Spawn guides are updated and linked down in the description. So finally, we do have Illuminate tips, and what's interesting is how blind they are. They weighted almost all of their detection into sound, so you can easily just push them across the map by like making explosions or whatever, and you can put them exactly where you want them, which is really fun to set up like really cool like strafes and stuff like that, but it also lets you have a lot of really fun and interesting playstyles to deal with them. As for the stick guy, if he's running at you just getting ready to spin to win you to death, just punch him. Your punch goes off a lot faster than his spin to win, and then it just pretty much stopped that situation from ever happening. And finally, the last tip, and probably the most important one, if you want to keep playing Helldivers and like really enjoying it after you've gotten through the main loop, and that's to find your favorite way to play to have the most fun possible. The main goal and playstyle of the game is to complete all of the objectives in Extract. This is where you start, and it's where most people will finish before they get bored with the game, and it's perfectly fine to play the game like that. That's how the game was intended to be played. But if you really love the game and you want to master something to like take things a little further, make things a little bit harder, and just enjoy the game more, that way you can keep playing without getting bored, there's things like blitz diving, where you try and clear the whole map as fast as possible. And then Extract, we've done this a few times to blast medals, and it's really fun in short bursts for me, but some people really love that, and they make that in their entire playstyle. Then you have stealth gameplay, and because of some of the advanced enemy mechanics, you can do some pretty insane things. Every enemy has like a unique detection radius around it, where like there's a whole bunch of different advanced stealth mechanics. We broke them down a really long time ago, and some of them have like changed or rotated back and forth over time. But I do think it's a really fun playstyle to do sometimes, because some people really enjoy that, like, you know, just the stealth gameplay, like you just ghost an entire outpost without anything going off, can feel really good. Like forcing different animation sequences on the enemies, it's really interesting when you go really in depth on it. But my favorite way to play the game, and what I think is the hardest, is kill farming. This breaks the normality of the game, where you just rush to finish the main objective and then call the Extract in, so that way you can ramp the enemy spawns as fast as possible, and then you usually end up farming somewhere near the Extract. And then if you have something like a mega base, or like at least a level 3 large POI, you can just get a ton of kills. And it's also based on like time spent in the mission, so the longer you in, the more enemies you kill, and you get some absolutely insane numbers put up. And I think that this is the most fun and best way to challenge yourself into getting better. But no matter which playstyle you like and what you want to do, or you rotate through all of them like I do, the most important thing is that you're enjoying yourself and having fun, and just doing the most fun, cool, and interesting thing you could possibly think of, because that's what Helldivers 2 is all about. No!
Nah, bro, he ain't like that. Nah, he ain't like that. Oh shit, maybe he is. Nah, he ain't like that.